Alright guys, Kuroko's Basketball Street Rivals will officially launch tomorrow on Global. However, if you pre-downloaded the game, then you can already see from the in-game announcement all of the banners for the characters that will be available. And two of the most interesting things to me is that first of all, we know who are going to be the rated banners. It's going to be John Kogmi and also SP Kuroko. And then the second thing is that there seems to be a 14-day rookie mission where we're able to get a free selection out of the base version of Generation Miracles, okay? So this video, I'm going to briefly talk about out of the rate-up, which one is going to be the better one. And then for the free copy of Generation Miracle, what are going to be the pros and cons for every single one of them, okay? So first of all, between the two rate-up banners, John Kogami and also SP Kuroko, Kogami is going to be the better choice out of the two. It's going to be by quite a bit of miles, I'll have to be honest. Now, the thing with SP Kuroko is that he's not necessarily bad. However, he's a support character. You kind of need other good players in the future to really make the value of SP Kuroko shine. And right now in the game, considering all of the characters that will be available at launch, SP Kuroko is not able to really cut it, to be honest. Whereas John Kogami is probably going to be, well, he will be the best character in the game at this point, and he is definitely capable of solo carry the game for you. So it's going to be a very clear choice out of the two that John Kogami should be the one you're going for. Now, if you're re-rolling, obviously you should re-roll for those rate-up characters rather than the one from standard banner as well. So once again, the premium re-roll target is going to be John Kogami. However, considering how low the rate is in this game, and normally for new characters, unless global changes things up, otherwise normally for a brand new character banner, you are only allowed to buy 10 summons with your free gems. Everything else, if you want to summon more, you have to use like real life money to exchange for paid vouchers. That's for free pool wise, you are only able to do 10 pulls on each of the new banners. So from reroll point of view, even though John Kogami is going to be the better choice out of them, consider how low the rates are. If you're lucky enough to get SP Kuroko, you have already won the lottery, okay? Just keep that account if you are able to reroll for him as well, okay? Okay, now let's move on to the main topic today, which is going to be Generation Miracles and which one should you pick in the 14-day rookie mission. Now, if I watched my video previously, you know I always recommend going for the position first, and once you decide which position you want to play, then choose a character from that position. And obviously for Generation Miracles, we literally have one character in each of the position. So if you're going via this route where you specialize in just one or two position, it should be somewhat straightforward for you guys to decide which character you want to pick. However, I also understand sometimes you may actually want to do it the other way around. You want to know which character are the best and then decide which position to then specialize in, etc. Right? So in that sense, I am actually going to do a quick rundown of all 5 of the character, just so you guys have a rough idea of their playstyle and their pros and cons. Okay. So let's start off with the center, which is Murasaki Abra. Now, he is going to be the slowest character out of all 5 because obviously he's a center. Vast majority of the time when you play him, you just have him sitting underneath the basket and just make sure he can block all of the upcoming dunks and layup, and also he's going to be in the best position for all of the rebounds, etc. Now, interestingly enough, out of the 5 characters available, he's also the only one with the rebound skill, because even though some of the powerfuls have rebound skill, I mean it doesn't get that until he's max deep. So if you really like the rebound mechanics in this type of game, then Murasaki Abra is going to be your obvious choice. He's also going to be by far the best center, at least at the point of the game launch, until he's eventually been power crept by his own version. Okay, but otherwise, in comparison to all of the other centers in available at global launch, he's going to lead them by quite a bit. Now, he is also somewhat cheap for you to build because you literally just level up his rebound and level up his block ability, and then you can ignore everything else. And also he's going to be easy to play because you literally just stand underneath the basket, right? So that's going to be Murasaki Abra. Then the next character is going to be Aomine. Aomine, even though he's a power forward, because he doesn't really have that rebounding skill, a lot of time he's more comparable to a small forward such as Kise. Now, his main scoring is going to be for those kind of 2-pointers, and he's definitely very good at creating those scoring opportunities with his very different drive and his very different shooting style, and therefore he has loads of different ways. Those of different blocking points that the enemy need to guess or memorize, and that can be making it difficult for them to guard against you, and therefore make it easy for you to score. Now, the biggest problem with Aomine is more the fact that he has some really long combos, which can make him somewhat difficult to play. Now, if you really want to play him, my only suggestion is that actually try him out in the story mode. I believe around chapter 4, you should be able to experience him in the story mode, where his skills will be completely unlocked. And what you can do is literally just go through his player page and learn off the combo and see whether or not you can actually execute them in the story mode. And only after you're comfortable that you're actually able to pull off his combos, that would then be the point where you decide to, okay, you actually want to play Aomine, okay? He's definitely going to be the hardest character to play out of the 5. Okay, next character is going to be Kisei. Now, Kisei is probably the easiest character to play out of the 5. Well, with the exception of Murasaki Opera, because he just stands underneath the basket. But with the exception of the center, otherwise, out of all the one capable of scoring, Kisei is going to be the easiest one to use, mainly because he gets a very strong upgrade at his Awakening 2, which makes it very easy, or sorry, very difficult for enemies to solo defend or solo guard him. And that basically makes him very easy at cheesing loads of points, especially at the lower ranks. Now, once you move him to the higher ranks, he can be somewhat more difficult to score with, mainly because the enemy would then have the mentality of actually assisting in defense. And if you have to have 2 people who know exactly how Kisei drives around, etc., it's actually very easy to shut him down completely. So Kisei for me is more of a beginner character, where he's very good in the early games, but eventually would then fall off as you rank up. Now, one thing which somewhat makes him more interesting to play with, however, is the fact that he can actually copy an enemy move. So from that sense, no 2 matches are going to be the same, because every single time you can actually copy a different move from whoever you are actually playing against. So from an enjoyable point of view, you can definitely have quite a bit of fun with him, because no 2 matches are the same. And that's kind of why I also think he's more of like a beginner character, in the sense that it's very enjoyable to play him. You get a lot of fun out of it, and you can also pick up loads of easy wins at the lower ranks. But then eventually, as you move up higher, it will get harder and harder to score with him. Okay, so that's gonna be my main source on Kisei. Then let's move on to the point guard Akashi next. Now, Akashi is also capable of scoring 2 points, just like Aomine and Kisei, and I would probably say he's just as good at scoring 2 points as the other 2, even though he's actually a point guard. And because of the fact that he's a point guard, he is also capable of playmaking as well, and that basically makes him very flexible during the offensive phases, because he's capable of scoring by himself and also creating opportunities for your teammate. And then on the defensive end, he's also very versatile, because he actually has a very strong interception skill, and on top of that, he's also fairly fast, in the sense that even though he doesn't actually have a blocking skill himself, but because he's fast, he can actually follow and mark a lot of your opponents very easily. And because you'll be closer to your opponents, it's also easier to block, because the fact that you're faster and you're actually able to follow them, right? So even though he doesn't actually have a native blocking skill, he's not actually bad at blocking himself. And that just makes him a very well-rounded character, because like I said, offensive phase, he can score and also playmate. Defensive phase, he can intercept and steal and also block. So basically, he's just a very strong all-rounded character. Now, the main disadvantage for him is the fact that because he's able to do so many different things, as a result, he's also very expensive. Because unlike some of the other characters where you can decide, oh, actually, for example, Kisei has some stealing and intercept ability, but those are not that strong, and therefore you can actually make that choice of saying, you know what, I'm just going to ignore his stealing skill completely, because it's RNG based, it's not that good, it's not worth it. Whereas for Akashi, because he's so well-rounded, if you actually want to get the most out of him, you kind of need to actually upgrade and unlock all of his talent cards, talent trees, and also from dupe-wise, he also get massive upgrade once he's actually at max awakening. So I definitely think out of all of the 5 characters, he probably have the highest ceiling. However, as a result, he's also going to be the most expensive one to build if you actually want to get the most out of him, okay? Then lastly, we are going to have the Shuga, which is going to be Midorima. Now, out of the 5 characters, he's probably the one who is actually able to retain the most value long term, because unlike the other 4 who would all eventually be power crept by other characters in the same position, and in some terms, their own version in either the SP version or the last game version. For Midorima, the SP version of Midorima is not actually necessarily better than the base version, and the reason for this is because the SP version of Midorima is, first of all, have a bit of RNG in his kit, so that basically makes him not very consistent, and also he doesn't have a blocking ability, which the base version of Midorima actually have. And once again, that just makes Midorima a bit better on the defensive phases. So as a whole, if you actually want to talk about the long-term value, a lot of the other members of Generation Miracle would be power crab, but Midorima is actually able to retain a lot of his value long-term because of the fact he is actually a very good blocker in the defensive phase, which is quite rare for a shoot card, and also the fact that he is also able to still very consistently be one of the best 3-pointers in the game, because the SP version of himself just fluctuate too much, just too much RNG involved, whereas the base version of Midorima is very consistent. Okay, so he definitely is able to retain the most value in long term, but the biggest problem with Midorima is not actually due to the character himself, but more due to the position, it being a shooting guard. And the reason for this is that shooting guards, when you build shooting guards, you need to build all of their potentials and the memories to be very much focused on 3-pointers, because that's their bread and butter. However, 3-pointers, those are not things which are transferable to other positions. Now, you might be saying some point guards can also shoot threes. So as a result, some of your 3-pointer potential and memories can also go on can go on the point guards, which is true. However, if you build a point guard with those 3-pointer potentials, you are effectively going to be playing them as shooting guard instead, right? So from that sense, let's say if you have if you're playing with some random teammates who are not very flexible in terms of team building, then what's going to end up happening is that you then realize there's literally only one role which you can play, which is just shooting threes. And that can actually be quite bad, especially if you're actually solo matchmaking and then end up with matchmaking with other players who are not very flexible in their own positioning as well. Okay, so that's going to be the main disadvantage for Midorima. And normally what that basically means is that if you're playing Midorima, either you just have to be very dedicated in the sense that you would only ever play that role, and you just ignore all of the other characters and never play any other positions, even if you matchmake with bad teammates. Or the other option is that you would have to build a second position or a second set of characters as well. But in those kind of cases, it's not just about training up a second character, you also have to completely train up a whole second set of potential and also memories for the other position. And in that sense, it's going to be a lot more expensive to play both shoot guard and also, let's say, a second position, which is very different to shoot guard.